Trust relationships establish the relationship between domains so that users in one domain can be authenticated and use resources in another domain. Let's learn how to create trust relationships. First, click Start, and trust relationships are created using the Active Directory Domains and Trusts snap-in. We'll open that snap-in, and here we see our forest. There's a domain named westsim.private with two child domains. Now, let's suppose that users in domain 2 need to use resources in domain 3. By default, there is a set of default trust relationships that allow this to occur, but that would require the resources in domain 3 to verify the user accounts by going first to westsim.private, then getting a reference to a domain controller in domain 2, and thus authenticating the user. To allow authentication to move directly between these two child domains, we can create a shortcut trust. Now, trusts have direction. In other words, in this example, domain 3 trusts the users in domain 2, so the direction of the trust would go from domain 3 to domain 2. Some trust relationships can be bidirectional. Shortcut trusts are one example of this, as we'll see. To create the shortcut trust, right-click the domain and select Properties. Go to the Trust tab, and here we see the default trusts that have been created, both outgoing trusts to the parent domain and incoming trusts from the parent domain. We're going to create a new trust relationship. Click New Trust, and click Next to begin the new trust wizard. Let's type the full DNS name of the domain that we want to trust. In this case, domain2.westsim.private. Then click Next. By default, shortcut trusts are two-way. We could also make this one-way incoming or one-way outgoing, but we'll keep the option. That way, users in both domains could use resources in each other's domains across this shortcut trust. Click Next. A trust relationship must be created from both sides of the trust. In other words, it must exist in both domains. We can create the trust for this domain only, or we can create the trust from this domain and for the specified domain. To create a trust from both sides of the domain, we need appropriate permissions in both domains. We'll select this option and click Next. We need to supply a username and password that has permission to create the trust from the other side of the trust. In other words, we need someone that has permission to create the trust in domain 2. The enterprise administrator has this permission, so let's type the administrator's username and password. And we'll click Next. Here's a summary of the options that we've selected during this wizard. We'll go ahead and click Next. And the trust relationship has been created successfully. Click Next again. And now we have the option to confirm the outgoing trust. This option confirms that the trust actually was created in the other domain. We'll go ahead and click Yes. And now we can confirm the incoming trust. Again, this is confirming that the incoming trust was made on the other domain. Click Next. And the trust relationship was successfully created and confirmed. Click Finish. And here you can see the shortcut trust that has been created. Because it was two-way, an incoming and an outgoing trust was created. Click OK. Shortcut trusts are transitive, and that's a good thing to remember. In other words, if there were subdomains of domain 2 or domain 3, that shortcut trust would still apply.